Hey guys, what's going on? I want to talk to you today about one of the questions I keep seeing over and over and over again, and it's what does the second edition of X-Wing mean for the future of Game X? So whether it's Legion, Armada, Imperial Assault, Destiny, any of the games that you play, what does this mean for the future of those other games? So if FFG is gotten to this point with X-Wing, are they going to do that with other games that they think are too convoluted or dying or need an update? So I kind of want to talk about that. It's one of the biggest questions I see a lot lately. And, even games as new as Legion, people are already asking, well, is there going to be a second edition for this? Should I bother continuing to play? And I guess that's the first part I want to talk about is, should I keep playing this game? Before I get too deep, though, I do want to remind everybody there is another round of the giveaway going on right now. So if you'd like to win a gaming expansion of your choice in the form of a $20 Cool Stuff gift card, all you have to do is subscribe and leave a comment on this or one of my videos. It's as simple as that. So, yeah, I do think you should keep playing. If you're having fun playing your games, I think you should absolutely keep playing. I don't think there's any reason to stop playing a game out of fear that someday, there may be another edition of the game that you play. Because I have a couple of things. First off, having a new edition of a game doesn't ever stop you from playing the old version of a game. And this is true for so many games, like board games. Look at Twilight Imperium just came out with 4th edition. I have a friend who has 3rd edition. We can still play that. It's still a good game. Now, granted, that's a board game, so it's a little different than a collectible game that you have to play with other people. But still, nothing stops you from treating all your 1st edition stuff as a game that you can still play 1st edition. If you probably know people who want to continue to play, example, X-Wing 1st edition. You're still going to be able to play that. Eventually, it's going to phase out a little bit. But I would invite you to an old game or an old series of games called the Decipher customizable card games. They made a Star Trek and a Star Wars version. And those are years. I was a little kid, so those came out in the early '90s, mid '90s, and it was a whole bunch of great games. Like I was playing Magic the Gathering, and I wasn't allowed to play Magic the Gathering anymore because my mom saw like a pentagram on one of these unholy strength cards and banished Magic from the house, citing it was the devil. And so I was no longer allowed to play Magic the Gathering after a certain point. And so to get my fix in, there was new card games that were coming out because this was mid-90s. All this stuff was brand new. Started playing the Star Trek customizable card game by Decipher, and then started playing the Star Wars customizable card game by Decipher. Decipher ended up going out of business. Game totally dead, and there's still people playing it now. So the community will still, pick up and play. So, and there's a continuing committee for the Star Trek game. They actually, have a community. They approve new expansions where they're print at home expansions. They don't sell anything, but they just keep the game going because they enjoy playing it. And so now it's a community run game. And if a game I loved were to become unsupported, let's say Star Wars Armada were to be canceled, I would absolutely take a role in helping keep that community going and testing new community-driven expansions or things like that. Because it's a fun game, and if it were ever to not be supported anymore, you could still keep playing it. That being said, if you're enjoying a game, by all means continue to keep buying it, keep playing it, because look at like a video game, right? Like you're gonna pay 50, 60 bucks or whatever. You're gonna play it for maybe 40 to 80 hours, for a week or two. You're gonna be done. Whereas, a game like this, you're going to play this for months, years even. So it's definitely worth your investment. It's worth a lot more. And also you're getting tangible goods with a lot of these miniature games. You're getting great miniatures that are always going to be useful for everything from building dioramas to desktop displays to, gosh, I don't know. And just about anything you can think of. They're really fun. It's just great to have. Like I used to buy Micro Machines when I was a kid too, and we used to get the Star Wars and Star Trek Micro Machines. I wish I still had a bunch of them. But that being said, let's talk about specific games. So Imperial Assault. I think Imperial Assault is potentially a candidate to get a second edition at some point because I feel like it's exhausted a lot of the design space. It could be wrapping things up with this latest, and this is pure speculation, but they could be kind of drawing things to a close because they got all the rest of the Rebels crew. There's really not much that they haven't accomplished after this next release. The only main thing I can think of is maybe, we don't have Yoda yet, so it's like the biggest thing, at least. There's a lot of smaller characters that there's a lot of characters that are on people's wish lists for sure, but they've pretty much wrapped up everything that they started, with maybe the one exception of Yoda. But yeah, so like there's a whole lot they could do if they wanted to maybe reboot Imperial Assault and do a second edition there. Although some people could make the argument that Legion is the second edition of Imperial Assault, and they just launched them, like they staggered them, so they launched the second edition while the first edition is still being supported. It's possible. They did something like this with Descent. Descent had a first and a second edition, and they had the conversion kit, and they allowed you to use your old stuff in with the new, and so there exists that possibility. And in the case of Imperial Assault, since all of your main characters are new characters, all your playable characters are new characters, they could potentially do a second edition of Imperial Assault and not reuse anything. They could just have a whole new set of characters, and then you still have the conversion kit, so you can take your old characters and import them into the new. So your conversion kit would actually be more content as opposed to just replacement content. So there's some ideas and there's some things they could do with Imperial Assault, but I'm not sure that they're going to do that, since they do have another expansion already announced. So if they do it, I definitely don't think it'll be anytime soon. And on top of that, they they have Legion coming out, so I don't think they would, or Legion is out, but I don't think they would want another Little People miniatures game, basically coming out at least not for a long time. Plus they have the app, so they have built-in support to keep you buying this product because the app is there. Next is Armada. So Armada is potentially a candidate to get a second edition. I can see that happening at some point because some of the problems that kind of pushed X-Wing down this path have crept up in Armada, but it's on a much smaller scale. I don't think Armada will get a second edition at any time, at any point in the near future. But it's not impervious, because look, no game is perfect, and over time every game is going to decay a little bit. There's going to be the more you build on a game, the more you're building up this eventuality that it's a house of cards that's going to crumble, and you're going to need to build a new foundation and start anew. It's in a game like this, it's only a matter of time. But Armada's so strong right now for a couple of reasons. First, they haven't saturated the market with expansions. I mean, the game's been out for a couple of years now, and we only have 7 waves, and most of those waves are smaller waves. Most of those waves are 2-ship waves, so, or at least half of the waves are 2-ship. They're smaller waves, which is great. Well, I mean, it wasn't great when the game was in its infancy and we wanted more stuff to, have a wider varying meta. But right now, we have a pretty good meta. Like, there's wide open stuff. If you've seen Worlds, there's a lot of different fleets. There weren't any Architects conga lines, so that at least that did really well. But every ship was, every single ship in the game was used, which is great. But the other thing about Armada is, that it's really strong right now. Like, there have been a couple of erratas and card erratas, which is a big bummer. But there haven't been any super terrible erratas, like ones that, this expansion can no longer use cards that it comes with, and like Jump Master quality erratas. We haven't really seen that in Armada. Now, one of the things they could do, because Armada has a relatively lower number of ships per side, as we could see, one thing that X-Wing 2.0 is doing is the 5 factions. We could see more factions come out for Armada. If you've been following some of my predictions and like the fake hyperspace report I did, one of my wish lists is to see prequel factions come out, but also sequel factions are totally a possibility, especially with Resistance coming out. And I'm really, really eager for that show, because I'm really eager to see what new ships they introduce, what new canon ships are going to show up, and what that means for tabletop gaming, because that could be huge for a game like Armada. I do expect Resistance to feature more dogfighting stuff. I think Resistance is going to deal a little bit more with the X-Wing corner of the product marketplace, but you can't have dogfights and not have any capital ships, right? You're going to have some in the background, so it's going to, and that's about the appropriate, rationale. You should have probably 2 new fighters for every new capital ship, somewhere in there, and I'm not basing that on anybody. I'm just basing that on kind of the trends and how things have generally gone. So either way, whichever they do, if they decide to add sequel stuff or they decide to add prequel stuff, because there's so much prequel stuff, but they're probably going to be pushing for sequel stuff with Resistance. So as much as I had thought that they would do prequel stuff for Armada, I think it's just as likely that they'll probably switch and transition into doing sequel trilogy stuff for Armada because of Resistance. And like X-Wing 2nd Edition has shown us, they don't have a problem splitting off Resistance and Rebellion to be separate factions. So that could be really good for Armada. I would love to see a 4-faction game in Armada. Actually, I'd love to see a 6-faction game. I would like to see Armada, tackle all 3 timelines and have two factions per timeline. A 6-faction Armada someday would be awesome, and I think that would be great, and I think that really would give Armada a lot of longevity, and so it wouldn't have to go into a 2.0. Next up, Legion. So a lot of people have asked, is Legion, and I think to be fair, I think some of these questions are a little bit more, satirical. They're like, oh, but some people are actually concerned. So I don't think there's any worry at all of Legion going into a 2nd edition, at least not for many, many, many years, because it's a brand new game. So there's no way. And I'll say this: FFG has gotten better progressively. Every single game that they have released over and over and over again has, made improvement after improvement. They look at what didn't work in the past. That's one of the reasons why I think Armada had so many, technical improvements over X-Wing. Even though it's still a different game, it had a lot more. A lot more improvements. The cardboard, for example, huge thing. Look at Legion, for example. You got pilot cards in Legion, like your T-47. You have Wedge, right? Instead of having a separate thing, a separate whole card for Wedge, and so all this stuff, you just have them as upgrades, which is really X-Wing should have done that. But Legion has made so many improvements as far as tabletop gaming over other games, and they have a lot more foresight into here. Look at there's so many upgrades. Look at all your heavy weapons upgrades and how they're restricted to that specific unit only. Look at your stormtroopers, right? You want to add 1 more mini? You don't just say, there's not just an upgrade that says +1 hit point or +1 miniature, right? It's specifically restricted to stormtrooper only. Same thing with rebel trooper only. And by restricting the upgrades to the specific unit they're intended to go with, it does kind of mean that you have to print more cards. But that future-proofs the game just that much more, because you're less likely. I mean, there are still upgrades that can go on anybody, but you're less likely to come up with these game-breaking upgrades that, oh, this new unit can take that too. Like, look at all the hard points in the game are restricted to the unit that they come with. They don't have any generic hard points that can go on anything, because that would restrict the design space for every other vehicle that ever took a hard point. So if they had this awesome mega cannon that came with the ATST, and it was restricted to anything. So let's say in Launch Wave you had a mega cannon, you could put on the ATST or the snow speeder. Well, now every vehicle you ever come out with has to include that, and they were smart, and they were restricting a lot of these upgrades to the unit that they come with. So I think that really future-proofs and makes the future very, very stable for Star Wars Legion. And additionally, if they get to a point where they decide they want to add new factions, you have the exact same situation I talked about with Armada. X-Wing has shown that they're okay with doing multiple factions, and so I think a lot of people have been asking for more factions for Legion for a long time since it first was announced. Basically, I think Clone Wars era would be perfect here with all the painting you could do for the clone troopers, and they all had different paint jobs anyway. Your battle droids have a ton of different infantry that you can add, and then look at the Camino. You have so many mid-sized vehicles that would look perfect. I mean, gosh, there's a lot there. And even if you're not a fan of the Clone Wars, and I get it, some people don't like prequel era stuff, you have to at least admit there is a lot of stuff there to justify a tabletop game's worth of two whole new factions plus a wealth of support and vehicles and stuff. There's a lot there. That being said, there also is probably going to be a lot of sequel trilogy stuff, especially coming out with Resistance. Just like in Star Wars Rebels, they're going to be able to show you so much stuff. I think it's pretty cool. I also want to talk about Destiny. I haven't really been covering Destiny, so if you, I don't know if you guys are aware, but like I really am not playing Destiny very much anymore. I kind of had been stretched so thin as far as the games that I can support, the games that I can cover, and the problem I was having with Destiny is in this random format is just the organization of it. Like I would have everything organized perfectly, and then a new set comes out and I have to change everything. And I was finding myself having to spend an entire night just reorganizing my Destiny cards and dice, and then going to build a new deck. I have to go through everything, and I think it was consuming too much of my time just trying to keep the game organized. Now that sounds silly, but at the same time I was having some other things with Destiny that I wasn't having as much fun playing it. It was becoming too much of a meta game and not as much of a just casual fun game, and I like where I can have more fun playing games. So I found I wasn't having as much fun playing Destiny because the people I was playing against were very competitive, and so I decided, you know what, I'm going to put Destiny on hold. If it ever goes digital, though, if they launch this in FFG Interactive, I will definitely play that, because online it's easier to play, I think, more casual-friendly games. I understand it's available in Tabletop Simulator, but I'm just not a big fan of Tabletop Simulator. There's something about it I'm not a big fan of. It's hard for me to really tell you. But I'm getting off topic. Destiny, while it is still an interesting game, and I like that it actually covers all three time periods, which is actually like a big thing I do like about the game. So if you want to have, General Grievous versus Kylo Ren or something like that, you can do that. So I like that, even though it's a little abstract. But Destiny has a built-in future-proofing mechanic, and that's the blocking. So blocking, which is it's a pro and a con. So I don't think Destiny has really much worry about a second edition because they have different formats. So, and the problem with that is, like, the first 3 expansions are already phased out of one of the formats, and then pretty soon, by this time next year, they'll be phased out of the other, and they'll only be able to use them in like the extended, like the everything format. But it's the same recipe that Magic the Gathering is used, and it's a way that they stay relevant. Magic the Gathering is still on the first edition, granted, every year or so they come out with a new edition, but it doesn't knock out any of the old cards. There's some that eventually get pushed to extended. There's some that but what I'm saying is every card has the same back. Every card is usable with the other ones. There's just formats that will allow. There's some formats that are wide open. And then there's so there's a lot of formats. But basically, Magic the Gathering keeps their game up to speed, keeps it relevant, and uses blocking to say, okay, you can only use these. And that's kind of one of the things I think X-Wing 2.0 is trying to allow the options to do with it with this app, is say, okay, you know what, for this month we're only doing stuff that was at the Battle of Endor, so none of the EU ships or whatever, so they can just try to make like a block. I'm not sure how I feel about that, but I do think that definitely works in a a collectible custom deck, a card based game like Destiny. It does stink, though, that like you had this great deck and now you can't use it anymore. But I mean, I've been playing Hearthstone for a while, and they do the same thing there. And I had been playing Magic, for a long time when I was younger. And it's just something you kind of get used to, because a lot of times you'll just play extended, and sometimes it's fun to play standard because you just want to play on a fresh, like a clean slate. I don't think that transitions well over into like a tabletop game, though. But I'm okay with it for once in a while. I don't mind doing like a no large ships tournament or something like that. I am okay with that from time to time, but generally I appreciate the flexibility of the design space, and like, all right, let's go ahead and build our lists. Like I had more of a problem with doing stuff like that in Armada, because there is only a handful of ships. So if you're restricting already a small pool, it's harder to do. So hopefully I talked about the things that you guys were wondering about. Are we getting second editions for all of our other games? Basically, I don't think so. I think since X-Wing was their first game, or their first game, from their Star Wars stuff, especially to blow up and be as successful as it was, there was just a lot of mistakes made along the way, and over time they kind of snowballed and kind of got out of control. And they said, look, we need to clean this up. Say what you will about the way that they've done it. Some people are very, very happy about it. Some people are annoyed about the conversion kits. Regardless of that, I don't see that happening in too many of their other games, at least not anytime soon, because those problems that made X-Wing 2.0 snowball are much less significant in the other games. So hopefully that clears things up for you guys. This is, again, just my opinion, but hopefully it'll put some of your concerns to rest. And the bottom line is, if you're having fun, keep playing the game. Keep buying stuff, keep playing the game, as long as you're having a good time. If you hit that point where you're not having fun anymore, then it's time to maybe find something else. And it doesn't matter whether it's first edition, second edition, whatever. If you're just not having a good time, then that's the indication. Not because there's a second edition coming out. You might pick up X-Wing second edition and find out you're just not having fun with it, and then maybe you need to find a new game. So it shouldn't be the edition that tells you when to stop. It's if you're having a good time. Because if you're having fun, then it's definitely worth it. That's my opinion. If you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up and let me know what you think down in the comments below. Don't forget to hit the little bell for alerts so you can find out when I have new videos. And make sure you're subscribed so you can enter into that contest for the $20 giveaway. So thank you guys so much for watching, and have a great day.